Well, joining us now to discuss this for our military panel is retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General and Newsmax contributor Blaine Holt and retired Air Force Special Operations Commander and National Security Expert Major Glenn Ignacio. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being here. Thank you. I have been so curious to get a military expert's response to what we heard from the president earlier, particularly after a very unsatisfying Senate classified briefing. General Holt, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, so that statement was very interesting. I will shoot down and not apologize anything that presents a hazard to the United States after it has spied and flown over all of our select sensitive military sites and gathered up all the information it could do to go back to Beijing. You know, this whole thing is, I said it this morning, this whole thing is a hot mess. Their messaging throughout this entire crisis has been inconsistent. Some of the answers that they give just don't make any logical sense, even to non-military people. And what we're left with is questions about our own security here at home, and wondering why we're spending $1 trillion a year on that national security.
Major Ignacio, according to reports, U.S. officials monitored the since shot down Chinese spy balloon for nearly a week after it lifted off of mainland China, yet it allowed it to traverse across most of the country. I had spoken to Republican Senator Marco Rubio a little bit earlier this week after he had received the classified briefing that the full Senate had received. He told me he had very serious concerns about this particular aircraft and what information it was able to gather flying over, again, sensitive military sites. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this from a national security standpoint and what your thoughts are.
Sure, absolutely. A lot of people say, you know, there's satellites and we have a lot of satellites that detect things. Absolutely. But, you know, satellites are in an orbit approximately 130 kilometers. They vary when we're in low Earth orbit. This device at 70 to 90,000 feet is about 20 kilometers. Because it's so low, you can see extreme detail. We're talking about, you could read a newspaper very well, depending on the cameras. The other thing is that it loiters over an area for a long period of time. The satellites fly over. This is able to stay, you know, for up to hours. When it does that, it can collect signals, it can collect imagery, but it also gets to collect what we would say a pattern of life. So if there's operations going on the ground, say with the missiles about how they're maintained or they're moved, it can detect this. Now, the Air Force is pretty smart and probably told everybody to button down when it was flying over. But that's the criticality of a device like this flying over the country for such a long period of time. It is quite different than a satellite. And the platform was the size of 3 buses put together. It's not a small little camera flying around. It's a big platform.
Yeah, General Holt, when I had spoken to Senator Rubio, who's the ranking member on the Intel Committee, he said that about 99% of what he heard in that briefing could have been made available to the American public, that it didn't need to be classified. You know, I know we've talked about before the overclassification of information. He explained to me that when something is classified, it's either because it reveals how that information was gathered or perhaps the source of where it was gathered. In this instance, I can't imagine that there would be either, given the fact that this thing was so openly flying through our U.S. airspace. But what did you make of the fact that President Biden didn't seem to be making this available information publicly available? It's going to continue to be classified.
Yeah, none of it adds up, Kilmeny, at all. I saw your interview with the senator. It was really quite good. But what we need to see now is an expansion of not only this incident, but all of these Chinese incursions into our airspace. You know, there was the laser incident over Hawaii with their LiDAR systems. There's these balloons. They have an extensive, many thousands of people espionage network on the ground. Our wide open border has now seen a 1,300% increase in Chinese immigrants being apprehended. If we think that there's not PLA spies amongst them, we're kidding ourselves. And so, you know, I would encourage Senator Rubio to be dissatisfied with what he was told and then basically come together and hold investigations and let's get this stuff, if there's not to be transparency, let's get people under oath to say what they said, did, and decided.
We're almost out of time, but Major Ignacio, how does the Air Force again go about shooting down these targets? This was something that Senator Mark Warner had discussed, was that there needs to be an identification system. There is a flaw in the process of how these are identified. And again, part of the Department of Defense program, their program Arrow, which has been tracking this, they're not getting the information that's being shared here.
That's absolutely correct. To give you an idea of how we do it right now, so there's an American Defense Identification Zone that's about 200 miles offshore, and our actual airspace starts at about 12. So between that, we have the opportunity to go up and intercept aircraft that may be adversary, like we did actually twice this week with some of the bear bombers out of Russia. That happens normally. So the idea that we track this balloon, and then it's within our ADIZ, we have the aircraft that are in the coastal zones that are designed to basically intercept this, could have identified that and started to take action. Now, friends of mine that fly this mission, they never practice against the balloon, so that is different. But hey, they're able to adapt accordingly. The difference is who's that decision? The decision went to D.C. And the idea that it took so long to identify and make a decision is absolutely wrong. And it's absolutely incorrect. That puts us in a very vulnerable position.
Brigadier General Blaine Holt and Major Glenn Ignacio, appreciate you both so much. Thank you.
Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Take care.